Hey, good day, everybody. Steve Abelman here from the Weather Company. I'm a customer success representative and a longtime aviation weather subject matter expert and forecaster. And today is our second podcast in a series of podcasts with the forecast team here at the Weather Company. Today's focus is on one of my very favorite topics and a challenging, possibly the most challenging weather hazard, and that is on turbulence. And as we know, unlike thunderstorms and other winter weathers that we've been experiencing across the country lately, turbulence doesn't appear on radar, and it's a very different type of hazard. We can route around a thunderstorm, we can see it. Clear air turbulence, on the other hand, can be the invisible disruptor. It causes injuries, it can frighten passengers, and it can burn fuel. And so today we're going to discuss the difference between light chop and this turbulence safety hazard and how we forecast it. I want to break that up a little bit more and say there's a lot of directions we can go in the turbulence topic discussion, but we're going to focus today mostly on TWC's safety critical forecast products, including SIGMETs, which are issued for known or high confidence forecast areas of moderate or greater turbulence, and our FPGs, or flight planning guidance charts, which are issued, for a couple of things. One, as a longer term forecast product, and also if we don't quite meet the SIGMET threshold criteria. Now, we do understand that customers have different thresholds, so we're going to focus more on our products and not customer procedures and what they do with our products. So right now, I am very lucky to be joined by a couple of our most seasoned TWC forecasters who work in this en route realm, and I'm going to turn it over to both of them to introduce ourselves. First of all, Steve Andrews, welcome.
Hey there, Steve. Thanks for having me. So my name's Steve Andrews. I've been at the Weather Company for over 27 years at this point, and in the aviation group since it started in about 2005, I think it was. So I've been here since the beginning.
Great. And also we have Kevin Bacora.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. I've been at the Weather Company for 12 years. I did some time in MedOps, which gave me a lot of experience with customer service. And then I came over to forecasting about 6 years ago, and I've been doing en route forecasting. And I also covered at some NOCs and IOCs for the Weather Company too. So I feel like I have a well-rounded view of the company and what we all do here.
Great. And thanks for both of you being here. I completely agree. You guys are very well suited to talk with me on this topic. So first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit more about automated turbulence in EDR. So the industry is certainly moving toward more automated turbulence reporting, with data coming from a variety of sources, including software in the aircraft, external devices, sitting in the aircraft, that all do a really good job of sensing when turbulence is occurring. So I'll start with you, Kevin. How is this data making a difference, would you say?
The best thing I like about the EDR is it kind of takes the subjective point of view of turbulence away, and it creates a more objective way to look at things because it's kind of an automated system, and then everybody's looking at the same data. So the forecasters, dispatchers, and the pilots all looking at the same data. And it's very useful that we're all making a decision based off the same data. And that's what I most like about the EDR because, we have model data, we have PIREP data, but model data is what it is. It's model data. So it's not necessarily an exact picture. And then the PIREP data is a subjective thing. But with the EDR, it's something we all can agree with.
Thanks, Kevin. Steve, anything to add to that?
Yeah, as Kevin was saying, it takes away the subjectivity of these measurements. And so it's just raw data. And if there's anything that helps forecasters, it's just black and white data that we can then come to our own conclusion. We can relate it to the models and what they're currently reflecting and see if their models are lining up with the active data that we have out there. So it's really a lot of that data is extra help for us to clarify what it is that we're looking to do and how to put together our forecasts.
Thanks. I'm gonna add something and interject something in here because I've been doing this a while too. And I'm noticing that this overabundance of data is making, or at least I have the feeling, making the forecasts in the short term less used. And I think it's important for us to continue to put out there that, balancing that what's ahead of us and what our reports are ahead of us with real short term forecast models and some of our high resolution model data and pattern recognition, that we continue to use the forecasts too. And we don't just use the data. data. Jet stream turbulence winds can exceed 150 knots at times. And so an area that happened 2 hours ago may be 500 miles downstream by the time you get to it. So I think that's something, that I think we should continue to pay attention to. Another question that I have, so we've heard from our customers recently, especially, that if an FPG or SIGMET area indicates moderate turbulence across a very large region or area, pilots may ignore it or they may reroute around it, leading to delays and excessive fuel burn. So what are you doing, or what are we doing here at TWC to tighten up the forecast so pilots know it's a credible, specific threat worth reacting to it?
We're always tightening the forecast by constantly cross-checking model guidance against real-time data like PIREPs and EDR reports. So when the atmosphere isn't behaving the way the model suggests, we adjust the FPGs and SIGMETs accordingly with that new insight we've received and analyzed. More accuracy, basically, it improves when we blend guidance with situational awareness. So it helps validate models against observed EDR PIREPs and evolving atmospheric conditions.
I think the product that we're creating is kind of an all-above approach. Like you said, Steve, that there's a lot of data out there and there's a lot to sort through. And that's what we're kind of doing as meteorologists. We're taking in all that data and trying to make a decision. So if you see a large SIGMET or an area that might not line up with what you're looking at, it's because the meteorologist is making a decision looking at all the available data and trying to give you the best possible forecast using all that data. So me personally, when I forecast, I like to use like 2 out of 3 methods. So the 3 things are ob data, which is PIREPs or EDR, and then satellite data, which is so important, and then also model data. And if I can line up an area with at least 2 of those, I know that the likelihood of turbulence being there is pretty high. Like, for example, model data, as I said earlier, is not necessarily perfect. And there's a lot of times that the model data is not picking up on something, but I can look at satellite and I can look at the ob data that's lining up with the satellite. So I know there's turbulence there. So the satellite looks good and I'm seeing PIREP reports. So I'm confident to issue that SIGMET, even though the model data might not be there. And then you can go the other way too. Like sometimes the model has data and then satellite, for whatever reason, doesn't look too impressive, but I'm seeing turbulence. And that like 2 out of 3 method usually works. And I feel confident about the product that I'm putting out and what I'm sorting through.
That's really interesting. That's a good point, because I think, adding that oversight from a meteorologist to model data makes a difference, and it really validates the data. So one other question, if there's anything to add, you think you both have already touched on this, but what else are we doing to improve both accuracy and relevancy of our forecast products? Either one of you have anything else to add there?
Yeah, sure. We're always adjusting the forecast based on new observations as they arrive. And so anytime we get new information, we're looking at it and making decisions. We're not waiting for that next model cycle to come in. So it's those rapid adjustments that keeps the products aligned with reality. And it also helps build long-term trust with the customers.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. One other question I want to ask, which is very similar to a question that we said before. There's a significant fuel cost to moving around and diverting and finding smooth air. So how do you help a dispatcher or pilot decide when a ride is bumpy but safe versus when it's a safety hazard that might be enough to injure a flight attendant or a passenger?
So I look at it like the 2 forecasting methods we issue. We issue the FPG, and then we also issue the SIGMET. The FPGs usually just indicate that you have a risk of hitting something, or it's going to be light to maybe a brief period of occasional moderate. And the forecast is fairly confident that that's the area that you can maybe fly through if you're okay with maybe a brief period of minor bumps. But that's where the SIGMETs come in. SIGMETs are areas that the forecaster is confident that this is where you're going to maybe come into a scenario where the air is rough enough where you might have like a safety concern, maybe because we're familiar with the weather pattern and we're pretty confident that that area where we're drawing the SIGMET is a high risk of moderate or above.
Yeah, from a safety standpoint, a lot of turbulence is uncomfortable, but it's not hazardous to the airframe of the aircraft. So then the real decision driver is how deep and how long that the potential turbulence may last, if it's something that crews might be able to manage without burning extra fuel. So we'll clearly identify those turbulence layers, and dispatchers can often solve the problem with a 1,000 or 2,000 foot altitude change instead of a costly lateral deviation. That's where the insight saves fuel.
Thank you very much. Okay, want to close in one area here. So we know our SIGMETs and FPGs are critical in decision making to our customers, but let's touch on a couple of areas and what else TWC might be doing. And I think the two areas I'm thinking maybe you could lead us down would be one about our model data, our MPAS model data, and the second would be a little bit about our human over the loop delivery system or hotel. So I'll start with you, Steve. Take us through one of those two topics.
Yeah, sure. So as far as the MPAS data, that's high resolution guidance that really has helped us make a major step forward because it better resolves jet structure, deformation zones, and shear environments that favor clear air turbulence. And it makes it so that we can identify them easier. So that extra data, that new data, the model data is incredibly helpful. And what we'll do is we'll help dispatchers understand when turbulence deserves action versus when it's just simply something in the background that they can kind of get through. But as far as the emerging nowcast concepts that we have applying MPAS data with EDR and PIREP data, we're always adding extra value to the forecast. And that value is also adding confidence to the short-term decision making that we can put together in those forecasts for the customers to make decisions based on.
All right, excellent. Kevin, how about you?
Yeah, the thing that I really like to talk about and have a lot of experience with is a hotel product, the Human Over the Loop. And that's such a really awesome tool that we have because we get all our data in that. So we're looking at the model data, the GTD data, and then we're also looking at the live data too. And then that's also where we update our FPGs and SIGMETs and all our other products from that system. And the data updates right away. And then we're able to draw something, type something out, and send it right to our forecast products. So if there's any changes in the forecast or any changes in the data coming in, we're able to update our forecasts, our SIGMETs and FPGs instantly. And you can see those in like Fusion, Pilot Brief, or anything like that within like 5 minutes from the time that we get the data, we update and send it out. It's really rapid. It's such a useful tool. And I really love working with it as a meteorologist.
Thanks, Kevin. That's amazing, and I've seen it in work myself. It's amazing. So you did tie into one thing I was going to sort of close out this topic with, and that is you did mention our tools and some of our suite of tools, which many of our customers are very familiar with, and all the products we talked about today are part of Pilot Brief Optima. They're part of Fusion, and they're an increasing part of our newest Fusion, eventual Fusion replacement called Maverick Dispatch. And Maverick Dispatch is even going to add another layer that we're working on, which is a Turbulence Nowcast, which is a combination of model data and more EDR data to give the forecasters a real good first guess product. And I've seen some of that coming out of our science team, and it's pretty exciting stuff. So I think that closes all I have for now. I do want to go to each of you, for some closing comments or thoughts about what we talked about today. And I'll start with Steve.
Yeah, so it's a fun job of really tracking turbulence, real-time reports with satellite and model data. It never gets boring as far as the excitement that it can bring, and then just the level of detail now that we're able to get into some of the flight levels and the timeframes that we're working within. So therefore, it kind of becomes more gratifying to sit at that desk and to forecast those areas, knowing that we are helping the customer in other ways than just saving fuel and safety as far as that goes. So when we label areas moderate turbulence, it's not a worst case call. It's a judgment based on the full picture at that moment. So the goal is to give our customers guidance that they can trust and help make safer and more efficient decisions.
Thanks, Steve. How about you, Kevin? Anything to close with?
There's a lot of information out there, and there's so much that everybody can look at. And I feel like my goal is so I can issue something and the dispatcher or the pilot, they know that I've looked at it and that's my judgment. So that segment that you're seeing is a combination of all the data that's out there, the satellite, the EDR, the PIREPs, model data, and just experience, just me looking at weather patterns for 6 years and even beyond that, because I've been looking at weather my whole life. And that's just my overall goal is just I want to give you a quick product that you can look at and trust.
Yes, guys, thank you very much for what you do, and it makes a big difference. And for those of you who know me and know I've been working, as a subject matter expert in turbulence for a really long time, and I've seen over the past 30 years an amazing difference in the quality of the forecast, the availability of the data, the communication in the cockpit, between the cockpit and the flight attendants to seat them. I challenge all of you to look at flights today and note how much more communication and how more frequently, flight flight attendants are seated before turbulence occurs. And part of that is associated with the real-time reporting that's available, but a big part of associated with SIGMETs and other short-term forecast products that the weather company is issuing to our customers. So I'll close with that, and thank you both for joining. And I look forward to our next session in a month or so. Everybody have a great day and talk to you soon.